I felt my chest tighten as I watched my son's mother-in-law, Patricia Vandermeer, set down her champagne flute with that deliberate precision that meant she was about to say something cutting. We were seated in her sprawling dining room, overlooking Lake Ontario, the Easter brunch table laden with food that probably cost more than my monthly pension. My son Trevor sat across from me, his wife Melissa beside him, and Patricia held court at the head of the table like some kind of corporate queen. "Marcus," she said, turning those cold blue eyes on me, "I've been meaning to discuss something important with the family. I'm Marcus Webb, 62 years old, spent 34 years as a high school guidance counselor in Scarborough before I retired last year. My wife Sarah died when Trevor was 15, and I raised him on my own after that. Worked extra shifts at the community center on weekends, helped kids fill out college applications at our kitchen table, drove Trevor to hockey practice at 5 in the morning. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and Trevor turned out to be a good man, or at least, I thought he was. He met Melissa at university. She was getting her MBA. He was finishing engineering. They fell in love, got married 3 years ago. I liked Melissa. Still do, actually. She's kind, thoughtful, always remembers to call me on Sundays. But her mother, Patricia, that's a different story entirely. Patricia built a cosmetics empire, or that's what she tells everyone. Truth is, she inherited her father's pharmaceutical company and rebranded it. Now she sells luxury skincare products to wealthy women who think spending $200 on face cream will turn back time. The company's called Vandermeer Beauty, and Patricia never lets anyone forget she's the CEO. From the first time I met her, she made it clear what she thought of me. Little comments. "Oh, Trevor's father works with children, how sweet." The way she'd introduce me at family gatherings. "This is Marcus, he was a counselor, was." Past tense. Like I stopped existing the moment I retired. She'd ask about my little apartment in Scarborough while she lived in this mansion in Forest Hill. She'd talk about taking Melissa shopping, spending what I used to make in 3 months on a single afternoon. But I kept my mouth shut. For Trevor, for Melissa. Because that's what you do when you love your kids. You swallow your pride and you smile and you pretend you don't notice when someone treats you like you're less than. That Easter brunch, though, that was different. "I've decided to establish a trust fund," Patricia announced, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin that probably cost more than my shoes. "For my future grandchildren, $5 million, to be exact." Trevor's eyes widened. Melissa looked surprised but pleased. Patricia's husband, Gerald, just kept eating his eggs Benedict like he'd heard this speech before. "That's incredibly generous," Melissa said softly. "Yes. Well, I want to ensure my grandchildren have every advantage." Patricia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "The best schools, the best opportunities. Not the kind of education where you end up working with troubled teenagers for $40,000 a year." The room went quiet. I felt Trevor's eyes on me, but I kept my face neutral. 34 years in guidance counseling teaches you to control your reactions. "Mom," Melissa started, but Patricia held up her hand. "Let me finish, darling. I'm establishing very specific terms for this trust. The funds will be managed by myself and Gerald, with input from Trevor and Melissa on major decisions. Educational choices, tutors, schools, all of that will be approved through the trust board." She paused, took a sip of her mimosa. "Marcus, of course, won't have any say in these decisions." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Excuse me? Well, let's be realistic." Patricia's voice was smooth, reasonable, like she was explaining something obvious to a child. "You spent your entire career dealing with troubled kids, druggies, teen mothers, kids who couldn't cut it in regular classes. That's not the kind of influence I want around my grandchildren. Someone who works with that element all day, who thinks a good education is about feelings and participation trophies, rather than actual achievement." "Patricia," Gerald said quietly, but she waved him off. "I'm not being cruel, I'm being practical." Marcus did the best he could with Trevor given his limitations, and thankfully Trevor had the good sense to want more from life. But I won't have my grandchildren's futures compromised by someone who thinks success is measured in how many troubled teens you convince to stay in school rather than actual accomplishments. I looked at Trevor, my son, the kid I drove to every hockey game, the kid I stayed up with all night when Sarah died and he couldn't stop crying, the kid I took camping every summer even though we couldn't afford much else, the kid I helped apply to 13 universities because I knew he was smart enough to get in somewhere good. He was staring at his plate. Trevor, I said quietly. He looked up, his face conflicted. Dad, I think maybe we should talk about this later. Your son is trying to keep the peace, Patricia said, smiling that sharp smile. He understands that this is what's best for his future children, don't you, Trevor? I just think we shouldn't make any big decisions right now, Trevor said, but his voice was weak. Melissa reached for his hand, but she didn't say anything either. She worked for Vandermeer Beauty as their marketing director. Her salary, her career, her future, all tied to Patricia's goodwill. So that's it, I said. I don't get a say in my own grandchildren's lives because I spent my career helping kids instead of making money. You're being dramatic, Patricia said, her voice cooling. You'll still see them, still be Grandpa. You just won't be involved in the important decisions. The decisions that require someone who understands what real success looks like. I stood up. My chair scraped against the expensive hardwood floor. I need to make a phone call, I said. Oh, for heaven's sake, Patricia sighed. Don't be childish, Marcus. Sit down and finish your brunch. I need to make a phone call, I repeated, and walked out of the dining room. I went out to the front entrance, past the marble fountain and the perfectly manicured gardens. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. Not from fear, from rage, from years of small cuts and quiet dismissals and being treated like I was less than because I chose to help kids instead of chase money. But I also felt something else. Something that had been nagging at me for months, ever since I'd started noticing a pattern. See, even after I retired, I kept in touch with a lot of my former students. They'd email me, text me, stop by the community center where I volunteered on weekends. And over the past year, I'd heard from 3 of them about strange skin reactions. Rashes, hives, burning sensations. All 3 were teenage girls. All 3 used the same products. Vandermeer Beauty's youth line. The one Patricia had launched 18 months ago, specifically marketed to teens and young women. The one she bragged about constantly, about how it was going to capture a whole new demographic, how it was going to triple their revenue. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Teenage girls have sensitive skin, allergies, hormones. But then a 4th girl came to me, and a 5th. Always the same products, always the same reaction. And they were scared to report it because Vandermeer Beauty had this reputation, this luxury status. They thought it was their fault, that they were using it wrong. So I started documenting, taking notes. I had them photograph their reactions, save the product packaging, write down exactly when symptoms started, old habits from counseling, keeping careful records. I didn't know what I'd do with the information. I just knew something wasn't right. And now, standing in Patricia's perfect front yard, listening to birds chirp in her perfect trees, I knew exactly what to do with it. I scrolled through my contacts and found the name I was looking for, Dr. Sarah Chen. She wasn't related to any Chens in this story, just happened to have that last name. She'd been a student of mine 20 years ago, struggled with anxiety and family pressure. I helped her find her path. Now she was on the Toronto District School Board and chaired their Health and Safety Committee. Marcus, she answered warmly. Happy Easter. How are you? Sarah, I need your help with something. It's urgent. My voice must have carried something because her tone immediately shifted. What's wrong? Remember I told you about those girls with the skin reactions? The pattern I'd been seeing? The cosmetics thing? Yeah, you mentioned it last month. Have you found more cases? 7 now. All teenage girls, all using Vandermeer Beauty products. Sarah, I think there's something in their youth line that's not properly labeled, something that's causing allergic reactions in adolescents. And I think the company knows about it, but they're not pulling the products. There was a pause. Marcus, that's serious. If you're right, that's consumer fraud. That's endangering minors. I have documentation, photos, testimonies, product serial numbers, dates of purchase, everything. Send it to me. All of it. I'll forward it to our legal team and to Health Canada. If what you're saying is true, they'll investigate immediately. There's one more thing, I said. The CEO of Vandermeer Beauty is my son's mother-in-law. She just told me I'm not fit to be involved in my future grandchildren's lives because I spent my career working with troubled kids. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Marcus, you helped me when nobody else would. You saw me when I felt invisible. If you say something's wrong, I believe you. Send me everything you have. I spent the next 20 minutes forwarding emails, photos, documents, everything I'd been collecting for months. Then I walked back inside. They were still at the table. Patricia was talking about summer homes and investment properties. Trevor was nodding along. Melissa looked uncomfortable, but silent. "Everything all right, Marcus?" Patricia asked, her tone making it clear she didn't actually care. "Fine," I said, sitting back down. "Just had to touch base with a former student. She's on the school board now." "How nice," Patricia said dismissively. "One of your success stories, I'm sure." "She's doing well," I agreed. "Works in health and safety. Very thorough." I picked up my fork and took a bite of salmon that tasted like ash in my mouth. Trevor looked at me, something guilty in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. I wanted to tell him he was being a coward. I wanted to tell him that staying silent when someone you love is being disrespected makes you complicit. But I didn't. I just ate my expensive food and waited. The rest of the brunch was awkward. Patricia kept talking about her business, about expansion plans, about a new line she was developing for preteens. Every word felt like nails on a chalkboard because I kept thinking about those 7 girls, about their scared faces when they came to me, about how they thought it was their fault their skin was burning. When it was finally time to leave, Trevor walked me out to my car. "Dad, I'm sorry about what she said." "Are you?" I looked at him. "Because you didn't say anything in there. It's complicated. Melissa works for her. We can't just what? Stand up for your own father? Tell your mother-in-law that she's out of line? You don't understand the position we're in." I opened my car door. "I understand that you were raised better than this. Your mother would be ashamed." That hit him. I saw it in his face. But I got in my car and drove away before he could respond. The next 2 weeks were quiet. Trevor didn't call. Melissa sent one awkward text asking if I was okay. I threw myself into my volunteer work at the community center, helped kids with their homework, ran a resume workshop for teenagers looking for summer jobs. I tried not to think about Patricia's words, about being excluded from my future grandchildren's lives, about my son's silence. Then Sarah called. "Marcus, you need to see the news." I turned on CBC. Breaking story. Health Canada had launched an investigation into Vandermeer Beauty after receiving complaints from the Toronto District School Board about undisclosed ingredients in their youth product line. Multiple teenagers had reported severe allergic reactions. The products contained a chemical compound that wasn't listed on the label, something that caused reactions in adolescents but had slipped through their safety testing because they'd only tested it on adults. The news showed footage of Patricia being questioned by reporters outside her office. She looked furious, defensive, insisting there was no problem with her products, that this was all a misunderstanding. But Health Canada didn't see it as a misunderstanding. By the end of the week, they'd issued a recall. All Vandermeer Beauty youth products pulled from shelves across Canada. The company's stock dropped 30% in 3 days. Lawsuits started piling up from parents whose daughters had suffered reactions. And then the real story broke. Turns out, Vandermeer Beauty had known about the reactions. They'd received complaints 8 months ago but decided not to issue a recall because it would hurt their launch numbers. Patricia had personally signed off on the decision to keep selling the products, to bury the complaints, to prioritize profit over safety. Criminal negligence, consumer fraud, endangering minors. The woman who told me I wasn't fit to influence children had knowingly sold products that hurt teenage girls because pulling them would cost her money. My phone rang. "Trevor. Dad, did you know about this?" "I knew something was wrong with her products," I said. "I'd been documenting cases for months. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was just bitter about what she said at Easter?" Silence. "Dad, they're saying she might face criminal charges. The company's in chaos. Melissa might lose her job. We could lose everything. Trevor, 7 teenage girls came to me with chemical burns on their faces because your mother-in-law cared more about her profit margins than their safety. Girls who were already insecure, already struggling, and she made it worse. She did that, not me. I know, And when she told me I wasn't fit to be around my own grandchildren because I spent my career helping kids like those 7 girls, you sat there and said nothing. So don't call me now asking for sympathy, because the consequences of her actions are finally catching up to her. Dad, please. You're my son, and I love you. But you need to think about what kind of man you want to be. The kind who stands up for what's right even when it's inconvenient, or the kind who stays silent because speaking up might cost him something. I hung up. 2 days later, Patricia was arrested. The footage was all over the news. Her being led out of her Forest Hill mansion in handcuffs, her lawyer, beside her, reporters shouting questions. Gerald filed for divorce within the week. Apparently, being married to someone facing criminal charges wasn't good for his reputation at the golf club. Vandermeer Beauty declared bankruptcy a month later. Too many lawsuits, too much bad press, too many retailers dropping their products. Patricia's empire crumbled in a matter of weeks. Melissa did lose her job, but she landed on her feet. Got hired by a competitor who liked that she'd been willing to walk away when things got unethical. Made more money, actually. Better benefits too. Trevor showed up at my apartment on a Sunday afternoon. He looked like he hadn't slept much. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let him in. We sat at my small kitchen table, the one where I used to help him with his homework, and he cried. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Dad. You were right. Mom would be ashamed of me. I'm ashamed of me. Why didn't you say anything that day?" I was scared. Scared of losing Melissa's job. Scared of making waves. Scared of Patricia. She had this way of making you feel like you were nothing if you disagreed with her. And I let that fear make me weak. I let her disrespect you, and I said nothing, and I have to live with that. "Yes," I said. "You do? Can you forgive me?" I looked at my son, at the good man I'd raised, who'd had a moment of weakness, of cowardice, but who was here now, trying to make it right. "You're my son," I said. "I'll always love you. But trust takes time to rebuild. You hurt me, Trevor, not just by staying silent, but by making me feel like I didn't matter, like the life I'd lived didn't count for anything because I didn't make enough money or have the right kind of success. I know, and I'll spend however long it takes proving to you that I'm better than that." We talked for 3 hours, about Sarah, about what she meant to me, and how I'd felt watching him die inside at that table, about the girls I'd helped, about why I'd chosen counseling in the first place, about how real success isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch and the kids you help find their way. Patricia took a plea deal eventually. 18 months in minimum security, 5 years probation, massive fines. She lost everything. The mansion, the company, her reputation. Last I heard, she was working as a consultant for some small cosmetics company in Ottawa, making a fraction of what she used to. Gerald married someone younger and richer within 2 years. Patricia sent Trevor one bitter email blaming me for destroying her life, saying I'd been vindictive, that I'd set out to ruin her because of what she said at Easter. Trevor forwarded it to me with a single line. Should I respond? I wrote back, "She endangered children for profit. What happened to her was a consequence of her choices, not my revenge. Don't respond." He didn't. Melissa got pregnant a year later. When they told me, I'll admit, my first thought was about Patricia's trust fund announcement, about being told I wasn't fit to be involved in my grandchildren's lives. But Trevor saw my face and he said, "Dad, we want you to be as involved as you want to be. You're going to be an amazing grandfather. Our kids are lucky to have you." And Melissa hugged me and said, "My mom was wrong about everything, especially about you." My granddaughter was born on a Tuesday morning in October. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. They named her Sarah, after my wife. When I held her for the first time, this tiny perfect person, I thought about all those years in guidance counseling, all those kids I'd helped, all those late nights and early mornings, all those times people like Patricia looked down on me for choosing to help instead of choosing to profit. And I thought about the 7 girls who came to me scared and hurting, about how, if I hadn't been paying attention, if I hadn't cared enough to document and follow up, they might still be using those products. Other girls might have been hurt. I thought about Sarah Chen, the anxious teenager I'd helped find her path 20 years ago, who'd become the person I could call when it mattered. Patricia had asked me once what real success looked like. She'd measured it in money and mansions and luxury brands. But sitting there, holding my granddaughter, watching my son and daughter-in-law smile at each other with tired joy, I knew exactly what success looked like. It looked like being the person people called when they needed help. It looked like 34 years of teenagers who remembered your name and checked in years later to tell you they'd made it. It looked like having the courage to stand up when you saw something wrong, even when staying quiet would be easier. It looked like this moment right here. Trevor leaned over and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for everything, for being who you are. I didn't fight Patricia because she insulted me. I didn't make that phone call because I wanted revenge. I made it because 7 teenage girls were being hurt and nobody else was paying attention. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good, watching Patricia's empire crumble. Watching her learn that money can't buy your way out of consequences. That hurting vulnerable people in pursuit of profit eventually catches up to you. She thought I was nothing because I didn't have her wealth or status. She thought my life's work was worthless because it didn't generate profit. But in the end, it was that worthless work that brought her down. It was the relationships I'd built, the attention I'd paid, the care I'd taken with kids nobody else wanted to deal with. That's what mattered. That's what made the difference. Sarah, my granddaughter, started crying, and I rocked her gently. Trevor brought me a bottle, and I fed her while Melissa rested. This tiny person who would grow up knowing her grandfather, who would learn that success isn't about money or mansions, but about integrity and courage and standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Patricia had tried to write me out of this story, tried to make me irrelevant, powerless, less than. But here I was, holding my granddaughter, surrounded by family who respected me, knowing that I'd protected 7 girls from harm and stopped a dangerous product from hurting more. That's the story I'll tell Sarah when she's old enough.